Hey everyone, TimaeuSS here, and welcome to another NIKKE video. So it's time to finally update our tier list review for the NIKKE collab. Even though right now we only have 2B, I wanted to make this update video because last time we did our tier list was 10 months ago at the release of the game. We did a community ass tier list as well as a NIKKE meta tier list. So let's take a look at how things changed. Of course, in this tier list review, we'll take a look at two of the most popular tier lists because they, I think, are the most accurate ones as a day one player. Okay, if you Google tier list NIKKE, those are the two that will pop up first. So it's very, very important that you check out Pride One as well as NIKKE.gg because everything other than that on the internet I've seen are just whack. Okay, so let's break it down of the NIKKE tier list. First, in this video, I'll make sure you understand how to use the tier list. It's not just, oh my god, let's say there are 4 SSS tier units here and let's just slam them in a team. No, I'll actually bring up my own game and we can take a look at how to use the tier list effectively and understanding what the unit does. I also will turn off my VTuber models as to not block some of the text or images of this tier list review video. So let's break it down. Now, first thing is first. Tier lists are very, very subjective in the way that one unit may work for you at certain stages of the game, while it's not going to be great for you later. And of course, all units will depend on investment. For example, SSS tier for 2B requires pretty much 10-10-10 in terms of the skill upgrade. So again, a lot of it will come with experience, but sometimes if you don't know, always ask in the community. My Discord is linked in the description. There's the NIKKE official Discord, and also there's the NIKKE community Discord as well. So 2 tier lists, and they also have different rankings. So there's a combined ranking, which is the general ranking, right? And here in the Pride 1-1, there's story, early, late, and the boss. Now, mostly the tier list that we care about is honestly boss solo. Okay, this is endgame. Endgame is pretty much boss solo. I'm not that big of a PvP player, just due to the fact that for PvP, it's mostly determined by combat power, right? Even if you have a really, really good team, if someone is 30-40% more than your combat power, it's not gonna matter. Your stats are gonna be scaled, and it's just not gonna do anything. So mostly we look at bossing or combined story. I'll just get this out of the way. The current story team, there is only one that is best in tier. Rest, you can basically follow the bossing tier list and go from there. But for story, there's only pretty much just one. Best in slot. It is going to be Litter as your burst 1, the bunnies, so Blanc and NieR as your burst 2 and 3. And then 2 remaining, you pick 2 out of the 3. If you are a manual player and you know about quick scoping manual Alice, then your team is going to be Alice Modernia. However, if you're not a manual player, your auto champ, then it's going to be Scarlet Modernia. Those are pretty much 95% of the top end game compositions, even for the mega whales. Okay, it's gonna be that. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about all of the top tier NIKKEs. I won't go too much in detail for the lower tiers because we're gonna be here for an hour if I do that. So it's gonna be mostly about the top SSS and SS, and for the lower tiers, for both sides, you can click on the character description and it'll tell you what they do, and I might just offer a one-liner breakdown. But let's go down with the SSS tier. So in terms of the SSS tier, it's pretty much the same across the 2 sides, okay, with very, very minor differences. So here is organized in burst, and here is basically an amalgamation of all the units that are in the SSS tier. Now, right off the bat, I think the best unit in the game at the moment has to be Modernia. So Modernia is really, really strong. She is at the top of the damage output DPS. And of course, if you have manual Alice, that's debatable, but Modernia is so good. She does single target damage as well as AoE, but you have to understand for Modernia, if you do your burst AoE, unless it's story, if it's against the boss, you burst, you lose damage output, okay? Unless you're level 10 with burst 3, then you can technically not lose too much, but ideally, you want to just have Modernia as your main damage dealer, followed by Scarlet. So we're going with kind of the damage dealers in burst 3. Scarlet, again, in here is ranked SS, not SSS, okay, for bossing. Scarlet is a day 1 unit. She's being so powerful at the very, very beginning. However, right now, she's kind of with every new toy, we're essentially using Scarlet as a benchmark, but Scarlet is still so damn good because in comparison to the other units that are really, really good in other, for example, PvE mode, Scarlet is also fantastic in PvP as well. So if you got Scarlet, the Pilgrim, all in all, good work, good work. And with the mention of Pilgrim, basically Modernia, Scarlet, Snow White, they're all Pilgrim units, which are 1%, and sometimes they have a banner like Dorothy and Modernia, but other times they don't have a banner. So unfortunately, you just have to luck sack with normal pulls, or your own banner pulls, or the mold, the Pilgrim modes. So we talked about Modernia, Scarlet. They're definitely SS tier. Modernia single target bossing. Scarlet has a built-in attack buff, which makes her super strong. So you can read the skills and there's an attack buff. That's definitely something you want to max out. It makes her hit extremely hard. She has the highest AR percentage because her ammo and her reload is what bogs her down. But you can supplement that with overload gear that gives ammo capacity. Now I'll talk about overload gear in my previous starter guide video, and as long as she has teammates to support her, boosting her attack, ammo capacity, or reload time, she's definitely not going to suffer from any of these drawbacks. So we talked about the bunnies, and those bunnies are on the SS tier as well. Bunnies are just too good. These two injunction just gives so much, right? They've got heal, they've got shield, they've got extra ammo and attack buff. They just offer way too much. They are game changing, but unfortunately you just have to have both of them on the team. If you don't, then the middle bunny, Burst 2 Blanc, becomes a 60-second Burst 2, which is not really usable unless you have another Burst 2 that's 20 seconds. But if you pair them together, Blanc becomes a 20-second Burst 2, which is insane. That's essentially what makes her extremely strong. You can see their SSS tier right here. Next is Alice. So Alice, if you can manual Alice, and there are lots of videos on that, if you can quick scope manually play Alice, Alice becomes an absolute beast. All right, absolute beast. One of the highest skill ceiling units in the entire game. It's just ultra bonkers. You can pair Alice up with Maxwell, and they're a really good team, and potentially we might see some synergy in A2. Of course, A2 is not here yet, so not on the tier list. I will release an update video once A2 is out, but potentially you can look at Alice and A2. I mean, could be Copium, so just wait for the update. But Alex Maxwell is what usually people run, plus the bunnies and litter. That is a very formidable composition. So speaking of team composition, you can see there are lots of similarities, right? If you have your squad, what you want to make sure that you have is a burst 1 and then burst 2. And if they're 20 seconds, that means you can run 3 burst 3, and burst 3s are usually your high damage dealers. If you have a unit that's really good, but burst 2 or burst 1 is 40 seconds, then you have to run another unit that's 40 seconds or 20 seconds to offset that. Basically, you want to make sure that you're bursting every single time, okay? So that's the bit about team building. So we talked about bunnies, Modernia, Scarlet, Alice, Maxwell, which is a teammate of Alice. Let's talk about the remaining pilgrims. We've got Snow White, Rapunzel, and Dorothy. So in burst 3, Snow White is undoubtedly SSS tier. So Snow White, for those of you that like to crit fish, Snow White is just so broken because her multiplier is insane on the S3. She charges her huge 7 dwarf cannon and releases a massive shot. And that shot can crit. So a lot of people, when they're doing leaderboard competitions, they are fishing for the Snow White crit, okay? And that shot pierces. So sometimes when you have bosses that parts align, it actually just crit and pierces everything, which is so insane. So in that sense, Snow White is really good. However, really heavy investment, really heavy investment for it to work. And I'll release an updated skill upgrade guide, okay? So that will have all the investment recommendations and who you want to build first. So Snow White, another damage dealer for solo bossing. For everyone everywhere else, it's not the worst, but there are obviously other better choices. So Rapunzel is a super good burst 1 healer. The only drawback to her is she's a 40-second burst 1 sustainers. That means you have to pair her up with another burst 1. Ideally, for example, Litter or Dorothy in that regard, but she will keep your entire team alive, and she has a revive as well. So with that said, she is essentially going to be super helpful for you as you're pushing story. If you don't have the bunnies, if you don't have Litter, put Rapunzel in. She's going to be so good in terms of regenning the burst because she is a rocket launcher. The AoE attack will make sure you gain a lot of energy, and she'll keep your team topped up by not competing with another burst 1 half of the time. So that is key. Dorothy is the last pilgrim and our latest pilgrim banner, which happened during half anniversary, and on release she became so good because for those of you that are not sure, Litter on release was a day 1 unit, and she has been the queen of burst 1 ever since release. There is nothing that came close. But Litter is there. since day one, and Dorothy came and actually is able to compete with her. Okay, her damage output as a quote-unquote support is insane. She can really do a hefty amount of damage, and if you build her with overload gear and you stack attack on her, she can increase the amount of damage cap coming from out of her burst and allowing the team to even deal extra damage. When we did testing, when Dorothy came out, the same team using litter, this was before bunnies though, okay? The same team using litter cleared about 5 to 6 seconds slower than Dorothy. For example, train was like 52 seconds on litter and 47 on Dorothy. So Dorothy is fantastic. Lastly, Pride One's got noise on SSS, but of course we don't see noise anywhere but S tier. So in this tier list, the reason why noise was put in really high ranking is for bossing some mechanics for the lower level players. You can use noise to cheese a lot of things just because she can taunt. Having a taunt, basically infinite taunt and heal on manual, makes her unkillable and she can be your solo sustain. However, if you get to the higher end of the combat, noise is not optimal. She's a 40-second that taunts but does not have the heal capabilities for an entire team in comparison to someone like Rapunzel. So as you fight bosses later on, noise will definitely move down to the later tiers. Okay, and last but not least, sitting in the SS tier for Pride One is Novel. Novel is super good because she enables damage increase, right? She ramps up slowly, but part of the kit is increase the amount of damage boss take. And in this game, you have to understand, the best buff is going to be attack percentage. The best debuff is going to be enemy damage taken. All right, those two are the best. Ignore everything about crit rate, crit damage. Although we're seeing some crit options at the moment, but attack is just far better. And then ignore about enemy defense down, whatnot. Enemy taken, debuff is going to be the very best. And Novel stacks an insane amount of enemy damage taken debuff on the enemy. So this is really good as an option. Okay, this is really good as an option. And you can see that she ranks SS on the tier list for NIKKE.gg. Okay, next. Well, let's take a look at if anything's missed from the SSS tier for NIKKE.gg. No, we've covered all of them. And then for the SS tier, so one unit. This is the new collab unit. I'm quite torn between SSS and SS for 2B. She's got so much potential because right now, right, in my previous team building video, her best partner is going to be volume and mast. In my honest opinion, without heavy investment, moderate investment, she sits at SS, okay, which is where she's placed on the NIKKE.gg. But if you build her properly, she is absolutely triple S, and even in the future, she's gonna be ranked higher because her HP conversion into attack percentage is one of the best in the entire game, and it only gets better as you level up, right? Her damage output, because her percentage multiplier for basic attack is so low, her damage output mostly comes from her 3000% final attack burst. And that thing can crit. That thing can absolutely crit. So her built-in teammates are volume and mass, and those two units are really good for 2B. And once you build these two units, they support you in terms of the crit department. You have overload gear, and the best overload gear for her is elemental damage plus crit rate, crit damage, potentially some hit rate. Once you build that and you start critting with her burst, she shoots up right at SSS tier. And also because right now we never had a proper 3-minute boss fight to test her capabilities in the long fight, we really need to see once solo raid comes out and how she performs, because starting at minute 110, if she bursts first, is where her peak is going to be, simply due to the fact that her HP, max HP, is going to stack, right? It keeps stacking. So if you have the overload gear with optimized lines and she starts critting with her ideal teammates, she's definitely SSS tier. But I think for the majority of player, probably 2B is going to be SS, and that's still somewhat of comparable damage to Scarlet if you have her, which is crazy, honestly, which is crazy. Now, another unit not talked about in the SSS tier, I believe Summer Anise. So Summer Anise was our summer limited, okay? She is so bonkers, and for most players, she's a lot easier to build. You just have to pair Privity with her, and out of the box, she's gonna be super good, and with investment like her burst leveled up, she's gonna be even better. But for a majority of the players, Privity is free, right? You can get her for free, so you pair with Anise, and she opens up a lot of doors to competitive team compositions. I can see why they kind of put her in the SS tier, because she's usually paired up with different teammates that if you use, you know, an Alice Maxwell combo into a Modernia combo or Snow White crit fishing combo, the most damage output result might not be as ideal if you use Summer Anise. But for most of the auto players, Summer Anise is broken SSS tier for sure. So you can see basically the SSS tier plus the SS tier agrees with the SSS tier. So you can just look at it as, you know, Pride1 had everything together, where NIKKE.gg split the SSS tier apart into another SS tier. The only difference is Helm, the limited Helm. Now, I don't really agree with Helm being rated up so high, just due to the fact that she's fantastic, I know, in Elysian Towers. However, in boss fights, unless the boss is electric coded, and even if it's electric coded, you might not even run her, right? If you have the 3-team setup. Burst 2 is kind of limited in terms of the competitive staging. You have bunnies in one, a novel in the other, and the third one, you can run something like mass now, because if you have 2B. But if you don't have these, and you don't have Dollar, potentially you can use Helm, but Dollar provides more than Helm against non-electric coded. So you really are locking her to potentially electric coded units, which, I mean, it's fine, but I just don't see her being SS, you know, SS unit if you are going to put her with 2B and Scarlet. But you can see Pride1 still puts her at SS as well. But from my testing, you know, I'm gonna have to slightly disagree with that. Now, for the rest of the SS tier, Pride1 puts Summer Mary, who is a limited summer unit that heals for a significant amount. But if you're watching this tier list video after Summer Mary banner is gone, there's no way to get her. I'm pretty sure we're gonna have to wait an entire year, considering how they don't run reruns. And then Pepper, another healer in the burst one. Those two are really, really good 20-second burst ones. And the burst twos, Guilty, an offensive burst 2 that will copy the team's highest attack unit's attack and then apply a percentage of that into her own buff. With Senti, a defensive unit in burst 2, and Dollar, a cooldown reduction. So cooldown reduction is quite important, and in Summer Helm, we talked about it, Summer Helm has that and Dollar has that, but Dollar's cooldown reduction provides a bit more. You can see the rest are quite similar. Rapunzel's rated a bit lower, NIKKE.gg, but everyone else, you know, Helm is there, Helm is also in here. So Helm is a lifesteal unit in burst 3. She was our very first raid up banner, and she survived to this day as an SS or S tier unit. Just because in Union Raid endgame, you don't want to sacrifice a slot for a healer, but you definitely do need sustain, and often Helm fills that role just by giving the entire team lifesteal every 40 seconds, right? Every 40 seconds when she bursts, your team goes from whatever HP to full heal without sacrificing offensive capabilities, because she helps with the team's damage. The rest is volume. Volume isn't rated as high on Pride1's, but I think volume and mass, these two, because they've been so prominent together, they see a lot more play. I would not be too shy to put them both in the S+ tier. And then, yeah, Guillotine is the last unit. Guillotine, now there is a cult of Guillotine. Guillotine got buffed, not very recently, a few months ago, but post-buff, she essentially turned into a Scarlet. Okay, if you can use her well, you can manage her HP properly, she will out damage Scarlet. However, for a lot of the players, they don't utilize Guillotine properly. They don't have the right team to build. They cannot keep her HP in the optimal percentage. So Guillotine is often overlooked, and in guild raid situations, when I was in the #1 guild in Scarlet, again, we did not use Guillotine post-buff just because of the uncertainty it brought, especially if something goes wrong and you have to use cover to dodge, or you have to do something to keep Guillotine alive. That variation could cause the fail of one run, and causing a failed run matters so much when runs are essentially determined by just a couple of minutes at times between #1 and #2. But Guillotine absolutely goated. Privity, we talked about a free unit. You can start her off building her as a damage dealer, but later on she becomes a support piece to units like Scarlet or Summer Anise. And we talked about Helm as well. The remaining units, I'm not going to talk too much about. This video is almost 20 minutes. Okay, I'll point out kind of the units I personally really care about. So we talked about volume and mast. Those two are now, I think, the new pair for your third team. Remember we talked about litter and bunnies in team 1, and then we had a Dorothy, potentially novel in team 2. A new rising star combo is going to be volume and mast paired up with potentially guillotine, Scarlet, or 2B. All right, those are some viable options. Drake used to be a superstar. She was basically leading the forefront of the shotgun team with Sugar, but they've been kind of phased out now. Everything else on the list are probably what if you pull you will use, but once you get anything else you can replace. I don't see anything that is crazy in here that I need to specifically say something about. But yeah, Noise is S tier here. I've given the reason why, as S tier above. All right. So anyhow, take a look at the A and B tier on your own. I think definitely something that you can explore as well. But for overall boss, you can look at the combined rankings as well. The top tier players, the top tier rankings for some of the units haven't changed much. So our tier lists are quite stable. Not a lot of new units released will break into the meta. For example, these three are day 1 units. This is a day 1 unit, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 day 1 units. So more than half of the SSS tier units are still day 1 units. We haven't received that crazy of a power creep just yet. So I hope it keeps that way, but I don't know how they are going to expand the roster while, you know, you pretty much lock yourself to 3 teams or 5 for solo raid, 3 for union raid, and it's more about character depth in terms of investment than width. So I'll be keen to see if they have something planned on the different game modes that we can also explore. But anyhow, this is the updated tier list for NIKKE and kind of explaining what each of these units do. So not just talking about you know, where they rank, but also going over what they do. I don't know if you guys want more in depth than this, because that'll probably be like an hour worth of video, maybe something we do in the anniversary potentially. And for sure in anniversary we will go over our asset tier list, which absolutely is goated, because we look at the jiggles, we look at the assets, and since this is why we honestly play the game, we will definitely review this for the anniversary. Anyhow, it's TimaeuSS here, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye now. Single-handedly carrying this game.